Okay, we have time for one or two more questions. This one sent in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Curtis Deerling in Missouri. I went to the Harley Race Wrestling Academy and worked for Harley for a number of years. There was a story that in the 70s or 80s, Harley was pulled over for speeding. When the highway patrol officer went up to the window, he recognized Harley. The officer said, "Harley, what the fuck are you doing?" With beer cans everywhere and a naked little person on his lap, Harley said, "What does it look like? I'm fucking." Have you heard this story before, and is it legit?
Well, no, I hadn't heard that particular one, and I can't say for sure, and it very well may be. We must say that it's not mentioned in this telling of the tale, but I believe the little person was a female, was it not?
I believe so.
Which helps the story a little bit. No, Harley Race was noted for driving 100 miles an hour everywhere, and for nonstop, drinking a beer out of one hand, smoking a cigarette out of the other hand, and driving 100 miles an hour and getting everywhere, and always being the one to insist on driving. And you couldn't be faint of heart to hang with Harley while he was driving in the car, but he knew how to get everywhere. There was a story I heard from a guy that used to work with him at his training camp there. Later on, he was in the back seat. They were driving him, and Harley was in the back seat. This was in later days here. And he was looking at the road atlas. Harley's an old timer. I'm sure he has one and had one in his car till the day he died. And he starts laughing. And they said, "Well, what's so funny, Harley?" He said, "I was just looking. I figured I've gotten in a fight in every town within 50 miles of here." And he was telling the truth. I can't specifically say that specific story was true. It probably was, or something else. Maybe he was fucking the midget one time and had the beer cans and they fell out of the door, when he opened the door for the cop the other time, or maybe they conflated the stories or whatever. But Harley did some fucking ridiculous shit. And who's going to tell him not to? It's fucking Harley Race. And he should have died 5 times, right? So he was, he had the car wreck when he first got into business, should have died, killed his wife, didn't it? He had that intestinal surgery from doing the splash and the table leg rupturing his abdomen. He had the boat wreck and a car wreck. It had pins put in his shit.
The injury in the match with Hogan, the abdominal injury.
Yeah, well, that's where the table. Yeah. He caught the table leg. Yes, I mentioned that. And there was the bisque. I mentioned the bisque. See, that's a Seinfeld line. You got it. Very good. I mentioned the bisque.
I know my Seinfeld.
But anyway, so I mean, yeah, anything is possible. I've told you before, I was sitting in the locker room in Greensboro one time when he came in to do a special appearance. And he was kind of, limbering his leg up and, putting his tights and lacing his boots on and everything. And I don't even know how it came up. I probably said something about, "God, Harley, you got to feel all those bumps." You'd be like, "Come here, kid." And he took my hand and he put his elbows and his knees felt like bean bags. His kneecaps were not in one piece and his ends of his elbows were not. They were like a bean bag. It was just pieces of shit. And I don't know how that he could still do the shit that he could do. But, that's why everybody talks about Harley being the toughest guy, not only because Harley could fight, which he could, but he was the toughest guy in the world. Not that he could whip every single human being, but that, he was just so tough, resilient, the meaning of the word tough. And how do you hurt this fucking guy? And can he get through anything? Or the guys like when Danny Hodge had his car wreck and fucking broke his neck and ended up in the goddamn, in the bayou beside the road and had to swim out of the water and walk, 2 or 3 miles to a farmhouse while holding his broken neck with one fucking arm so that his head would be stabilized. He swam out of the bayou, walked 3 miles in the middle of the night in the dark. Who fucking does that shit? So all those guys, you know, they did whatever the fuck they wanted to. I've heard some stories about Hodge, too. I heard some stories about Hodge one night from this lady in Little Rock who was apparently one of his ardent admirers, and it got over with me even more, some of his personal habits.
Are you going to expand upon that?
Absolutely not.
He'll still kick your ass.
He would. No, well, I guess he'd probably not want it bandied about in public, but he'd probably be proud of it. But we won't go there.
Oh, okay.
Huh?
Okay.
Huh? What?
I was going to say proud of your ass. It took me a second to realize what you were.
Proud of the story being told in He wouldn't. He might not want the story told in public, but he would be proud of people knowing the story at the same time. At least he'd have been proud of the boys knowing the story. A lot of the boys knew a lot of Hodge stories.